Ladies and gentlemen, hell has officially frozen over. Last week, Firaxis announced Civilization 7's next DLC, Tides of Power, with one huge caveat. It's completely free. Yes, that's right, free. No kidney required. Tides of Power includes 2 new leaders, 4 new cultures, 4 new wonders, and a patch that focuses on reworking 12 civs while overhauling naval combat. This is on top of new resources, further UI changes, and more, all of which I'll be covering in depth for this video. I'll also be talking about how to get the DLC later on in the video. But I want to preface this yap sesh with my initial reaction, because while I was quite shocked with the news that we would be getting free content this early on, Firaxis has given out DLC for free before. Look at the Leader Pass for Civ 6. But that usually happens at the end of a game's life cycle. In my last video, where I covered the previous update, I mentioned that Civ 7 saw a stabilization in negative reviews, but that its player numbers had not seen much improvement. As of now, there hasn't been any huge changes, despite some great updates. I won't try to speculate too much, but I think we're at a point where Firaxis is throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. Even the cultures this pack introduces are far more experimental than previous content. Pirates? Iceland? Blackbeard? While they fit with the theming of the DLC, being naval focused, a lot of this is left field, and we'll see whether or not it pays off. But since naval gameplay is the focus for this patch, let's dive in and look at the major changes. The harbor is a new improvement that seeks to empower coastal starts. In fact, a lot of the changes here make islands more forgiving. Harbors provide +1 production per fishing boat and act as a spawning point for naval units. 1.3.0 is also changing how coastal resources spawn for more consistent starts. This is already on top of 3 new coastal resources being added: cowrie, crabs, and turtles, plus 1 additional land resource, pitch. Pitch has the added effect of making coastal settlements stronger, so it seems like all of these additions will make naval starts far more powerful than they were previously. Historically, coastal starts have been very inconsistent throughout the franchise's history, and I think we will need to see more buildings added for the Antiquity and Exploration ages. Civ 7 pushes the player to develop as much as they can, and when you've built all of your fishing quays, large coastal regions can feel like dead zones on the map. As an aside, I've already noticed the changes to resource spawning. My starts have had a far better selection of resources that spawn in larger clusters now. Atolls are making a return from Civ 5 to liven up oceans. They specifically spawn in deep ocean terrain, which can now be worked in the modern age and is another buff to islands. Lotus terrain, lotuses? Lotussies? However you want to say the plural word for lotus, will appear on freshwater tiles as a terrain feature, too. Pre-existing terrain features like reefs have received buffs to make them level with these new additions. Lastly, naval units have now been split into light and heavy ships. Light ships have increased movement, vision, and the ability to flank. They are classified as melee units, while heavy ships are ranged. At the cost of vision and movement, heavy ships hit harder, so you may need to put more strategy behind your navy compositions. You can check out my live stream where I tested out the new patch and cultures, but this distinction was surprisingly apparent? At least to me, the AI seems to have a much better grasp on naval combat now. I went to war with Himiko expecting her to roll over, but both times she had at least a dozen ships waiting for me as Blackbeard. I may be chopped at the game, but in the past I've always dominated the AI navally no matter the difficulty, so this caught me off guard. With some more testing after the livestream, I've concluded this update has done a solid job at rebalancing naval combat. The 2 new categories had me placing reliance on ranged units, helping me to counteract the light ship spam that the AI seemed to rely on. I was also able to get a better feel for the new privateer unit, which grants gold for defeating enemy ships. Since it's a light ship, I didn't use it nearly as much despite its bonus. Rather, I would keep a few at the edge of engagements and use them to clean up afterwards. So, to sum things up, heavy ships did the heavy lifting for my navies. Are the 2 new classes of ship nice? Yes, but I eventually reconfigured my navies to favor heavy ships and big improvements followed. Now that I've gone over all of the updates to naval combat, I want to talk about my experience with the paid, but technically free for the time being, content. Part 1 of Tides to Power introduces the Tonga, Pirates, and Blackbeard. It also includes a few new wonders like Naval and the Great Lighthouse. I'll confess that I was skeptical of the pirates on reveal, because while I love a good shanty, the culture's historical impact was laughably short. Their civilization lasted for barely a century before collapsing. But, nevertheless, I was pleasantly surprised by their design, and I first tried the pirates with Blackbeard on stream, because they fit together quite well. Blackbeard's leader ability allows him to convert defeated enemy ships into allied vessels, which I tried to use on stream to quickly snowball. The other part of his ability lets him send ships into any civ's borders and wreak havoc. As a penalty, Blackbeard has an increased upkeep cost of 1 gold per ship to balance things out. This penalty may seem minor, but it quickly stacks up because of how effective Blackbeard is at capturing enemy ships. In a lot of ways, he plays similarly to Genghis Khan in Civ 6, whose leader ability let him capture cavalry units. I found this to be insanely powerful when timed correctly. I grew my nomadic boat horde by preying on unsuspecting city-states, before sending my swarmmen to devour the AI. And because Blackbeard needs quick cash infusions like an unemployed college student, he pairs perfectly with the new pirates culture. These Pirates of the Caribbean seem to be designed around Blackbeard's kit. The naval station and arsenal unique buildings provide production and gold to ensure that 1. Your navy is always funded, and 2. You can build a navy in the first place. Like I said, the AI is no pushover if they get the prep time to build ships. Flying Gang, their civ ability, almost overlaps too much with Blackbeard, because it also allows your naval units to enter enemy territory without declaring war. Further buffs to pillaging were to be expected, but there is one huge drawback, and that is how they settle cities. Since you cannot normally build or buy settlers, buccaneers act like legions, where they get a single charge to found settlements. This restriction basically forced me to play tall unless I wanted to conquer as many coastal cities as possible. My starts benefited from going wide in antiquity, and then using my developed settlements to fund the navy before I could research the pirate traditions. Unfortunately, you can't actually found settlements with buccaneers until you research ports of call. So, the pirates benefit from antiquity predecessors like the Tonga, who can pump out insane amounts of culture thanks to their unique buildings. Ironically, my livestream experience with the Tonga went much smoother despite the focus of the stream being on raiding and pillaging. You can check out the link in the description, but the unique Langi and Vaikaukau buildings guaranteed I had any civic I needed. The Langi in particular made me question the Tonga's diplomatic and expansionist labels, because I was wiping the floor with the AI with my adjacency bonuses. The Vaikaukau also helps in the culture department thanks to bonuses from coastal tiles. Together, the consistency of the Langi combined with their Tofia unique quarter synergized so well that I was able to grab wonders that the AI normally rushes to build. This culture reminded me a lot of the Maori from Civ 6, who had incredible culture generation and a unique ocean start. Unfortunately, Firaxis missed the opportunity to make the Tonga start in the ocean, but I can understand why due to balancing reasons with treasure resources. However, their Tahina unique scout can immediately embark in the ocean with no damage penalty. This means you can meet tons of city-states and get a massive head start diplomatically on the AI. Kava Ceremony makes befriending city-states disgustingly cheap. If you grab a diplomatic city-state and the attribute that further reduces the cost of this action, you'll end up only spending something like 20 to 30 influence. You can also immediately build a trade route to city-states after befriending them due to Lapita origins. This means you're getting a ton of resources early on, making the economic victory almost automatic. In many ways, this culture has reaffirmed my view that Firaxis isn't afraid to reiterate on existing cultures. The Assyrians were a flat-out better Persia, because they excelled at getting a scientific edge and holding cities. Carthage easily beat the Axumites at resource gathering, and now, ironically, the Tonga have done an even better job at Carthage in the coastal gameplay department by virtue of their unique scout, incredible culture output, and very well-rounded traditions. I don't have an issue with Firaxis reiterating on previous cultures, per se, as long as they go back and make weaker cultures more relevant. In 1.3.0, they've taken a look at a dozen cultures and made adjustments accordingly. You can see the full list of changes in the patch notes, and I wanted to point out the most meaningful readjustments, in my opinion. About half of the cultures have received respectable, full-on reworks, while other cultures have received small buffs or nerfs. For example, the changes to Persia made several big changes to their Paradesa, which felt like an incredibly weak improvement compared to its previous iteration. The culture it receives scales far more consistently to help with their civic research. Some smaller changes also focused on the earlier cultures. I'd like to see the developers tackle modern civs in upcoming patches, but some of these changes seem quite impactful for a few lines of text. The Maya's oppressive science generation has been nerfed, which makes sense as they were one of the strongest antiquity cultures next to the Mississippians. Speaking of which, the latter's shell-timbered pottery tradition, which gives a gold adjacency bonus to any buildings adjacent to a resource, is now stricter. Although the change was needed, the new adjacencies still seem pretty forgiving. I'm not disappointed to see a nerf, but I'd like to see more of an emphasis on buffing their unique building, just like the changes to Persia. Also, since we're talking about balance, Firaxis has tried to elevate Egypt and the Axumites with this patch. These changes are more subjective to me, because I always thought that Egypt was strong in the right hands. The buffs double down on their current playstyle by increasing yields on navigable rivers, but I would have personally tried to make their spawns more reliable. I've complained before about Egypt's unreliable river starts, and when you make this the main feature of their culture, it is more punishing when your start is missing them. Aksum received broader, less specific buffs than either Egypt or Persia. Will they be stronger after this patch? Definitely. But my core complaint with the Axumites was their over-reliance on gold generation. When the culture ends up being one-dimensional, I don't want to play it nearly as much if the competition does their job better. If I want to focus on gold or coastal exploration, I'll just play Egypt, Tonga, or Carthage. I think I've spoken enough about these balance changes, but I'm linking the full patch notes in the description so that you can read them firsthand. These are fairly substantial changes, and overall, I'm pleased with what Firaxis has done, barring a few nitpicks. I want to end my coverage for 1.3.0 by discussing the future and where we are now with the current state of the game. I know I mentioned player numbers already, but I have a feeling that free DLC alone won't be enough to fully resurrect Civ 7. With the game's drop in players, the developers are trying out newer features, like staying as one culture throughout the game. Humankind, a previous Civ competitor, also saw a similar drop in player numbers due to a poor launch, and subsequent lackluster follow-up patches. Despite this, Firaxis is the same developer that released Civ 5, which easily had the worst launch, content-wise, of any game in the franchise, including Civ 7, by the way. Against all odds, Civ 7 had an incredible turnaround due to expansions like Gods and Kings, which added back missing mechanics like religion that Civ 5 should have launched with. This spiel is to clarify that yes, I think a turnaround is definitely possible, because we have seen this situation before, but that doesn't mean a turnaround is guaranteed. In the developer diary, Ed Beach, Civ 7's director, says that the free DLC is a thank you to the fans. I genuinely believe this, but I also believe it is a further attempt at salvaging goodwill because of how pricey previous DLCs were for Civ 7. You have a large amount of players who could potentially be won over from Civ 5 and 6. Don't check on Civ 4, but are largely skeptical given Civ 7's launch. Furthermore, they've already sunk a significant amount of time and money into prior entries. Why not wait 2 years for further patches and a steeper discount? This isn't rocket science, and a lot of viewers have echoed this sentiment in the comment section. I theorize the more experimental patches reflect this greater effort to win players back. We've seen new city-states, resources, culture reworks, and several UI overhauls less than a year in. Now, the developers are saying that they want to test keeping your culture throughout the ages? If this isn't a concession, then I don't know what is. They've created a new map generator in an effort to scrap the barrier islands that separated continents, and in my mind, this is a further step in that direction, instead of one big revelation. There's been a lot of comments across Reddit and YouTube bemoaning these changes, whether it was because the comments preferred the design team's original philosophy or another reason altogether. At the same time, I don't think a particular group of fans have won out. Instead, I view this as Firaxis trying to appeal to both sides of the spectrum. Not that spectrum. Players that like the idea of their culture continuously changing as the game progresses, and those that prefer a more traditional approach. It's not like Ed Beach is holding you at gunpoint and forcing you to play a certain way. For example, earlier patches added the option to let you choose how harsh you wanted the transition to be for an age, instead of having no choice at all. Again, I view this as a concession as well, but not with strictly negative connotations. I think it's more along the lines of saying, we went too hard in one direction, and now we're trying to let people find their own balancing act. The consequence of this is that more dev time will have to be spent fleshing out options for both parties, and I actually think this is the best way to go forward. Anecdotally, I've jumped between modes like regroup and continuity, and I'll probably jump between multiple cultures versus just one culture in the future. Back in my original review, my main takeaway was that the new culture system allowed for more replayability. Swapping between different civilizations was a radical change, but those new gameplay elements introduced via mixing and matching different civs was a huge improvement. On the contrary, I wasn't a big fan of the collapse narrative being why I had to swap cultures. It didn't feel natural when I was carrying the game and dominating the crisis. So, the entire point of this tangent is to say that I believe Civ fans don't fall into this absolutist view of being two distinct categories. Rather, it's a spectrum that probably has most people falling somewhere in the middle, with the opposite ends preferring the traditional experience versus embracing all of the new mechanics that Civ 7 has to offer. But let me know in the comments if you agree with my analysis, and where you think you fall on the spectrum. I think the free DLC is going to be fairly effective at winning a few players back, but I'm curious to know if you'll start playing Civ 7 because of it, if you haven't already. Alright, now for this part of the video, I'm going to try to be as concise and comprehensive as possible because Firaxis makes it a bit confusing on how to get the DLC itself, which is called Tides of Power. Basically, what I did, because for the first 2 to 3 hours, the DLC was not available due to a bug or whatever reason, it eventually was made available, so I was waiting on the Steam page and camping it out. But you can first go to the webpage itself, just type in Tides of Power. Go to this part of the page here, click Learn More, and then there will be a brief Q&A, and The first time I clicked this, I was kind of confused because it is fairly broad on how to claim the offer, because it says to basically navigate to your specific platform, blah, blah, blah. For this, I used Steam. I believe you can also claim this on GOG. But once you get to this page, just go ahead and click download and it should immediately appear in your Civ 7 library. For me, the process was a little bit different, but right now it should be good to go. I double checked the Reddit forums and that seems to be working for everyone. But let me know in the comments if this is not working for you and I will see what I can do.